Welcome, gentle listener. I'm Baldermort, and I wish to introduce you to the factions of the Warhammer 40k universe. I hope you enjoyed my introduction to the Imperial Guard, the Astra Militarum, and the subsequent video on the Rattlings. So, let us now explore the Militarum Auxilla in more detail. The Militarum Auxilla is the collection of forces that cannot honestly be called human any longer, yet they are barely tolerated in the Imperium, as they could be used in the forces of the Imperium's armies, often to great effect. Today, let us discuss the largest of all Abhuman strains commonly seen in the Auxilla. Let us discuss Ogryns. They come from a past of colonies that had settled on worlds that could sustain life, but had substantially different climes and gravity norms that have slowly changed the baseline form into one that is more appropriate for survival on that planet. When the Great Crusade went out into the galaxy and discovered and subsequently converted or conquered all of the worlds it came across, they eventually found the worlds populated by the Ogryns. The Ogryn worlds were universally higher than normal gravity and exceptionally difficult climes and conditions, barren and hard worlds where little sustenance could be gained through agriculture, and very often with incredibly dangerous indigenous predatory animals. There was also a very recurrent theme in them. Often, the ancient archives and the very structures of the most antiquated buildings of the cultures were patently incarceration facilities. Yes, the Ogryns are the descendants of the most vicious criminals produced by the enlightened period of the Age of Technology, when humanity was at its absolute cultural and technological zenith. Yet still, there were elements in that society so recalcitrant, so desperately wrong, that the only possibility of managing their baser instincts was to put them in a prison world, a huge jail. The specifics of each world did seem to differ across the galaxy, no consistency being prevalent in any of the myriad worlds that the Crusade encountered, but the results were almost universal, standard and documentable. They produced the Ogryns. But what is an Oggryn? One might think that Ogryns would be akin to the classic fairy tale and parable of a huge humanoid monster with a rapacious appetite for babies, equipped with a mean streak wide enough to park a battleship on. A creature that takes as much pleasure out of inflicting pain and injury as it does to sate its insatiable, rapacious hunger. The kind of nightmare entity that would bite the head off a fluffy-wuffy wabbit and spit it onto the ground, just to see the look of shocked angst that would be conjured from said fluffy-wuffy's owner. You would not be far from the truth in many regards. They are hulking brutes many feet taller and wider than a normal human. They have skin so tough that it can turn most injury or blades off without so much as a bruise. Their strength is a terrifying thing to behold and is many times that of a baseline human. But the Ogryn is not the ogre of classic fable. Ogryns are very hot-headed, and their most experienced emotion is indeed anger. They can fly into unquenchable rages at what others would consider the slightest of provocations, sometimes with no explanation whatsoever that can be discerned. Their rampages can be astonishingly destructive, and any attempt to mollify them can end in a head being popped or a vehicle being upended. Nobody but a larger Ogryn will approach one when it is in the midst of a rage. But that is again where the similarities to the classic ogre end. Ogryns do not have layers, as some might say, for they are as stupid as they are large. As the environment and conditions they were exposed to over thousands of years took its toll, the need for size, resilience, and strength outweighed the need for intellect or problem-solving attributes. In the barbaric and incredibly difficult circumstances they faced, only the largest, strongest, and most aggressive would be able to survive. Humanity is intrinsically tribal, so the inmates of these planets did stay in some form of a society, as they are still human, but the conditions utterly changed their very biology. Thus did the mind of the Ogryn devolve into a thing of very, very limited ability. Hence they are not akin to ogres. as they simply do not have the mental capacity for malice or spite. Although they are dangerous to have amongst the camp, they are far from what most would describe as evil. Even an orc boy or grot would beat them hands down in any match of intellect or cunning. Think more of Mice and Men, and less Dungeons and Dragons, and you will not be far off the mark. Alas, they do still suffer from rage, however. Ogryns have such pitifully low intellect that they are difficult to use effectively in combat situations. The consequences of issuing multiple stage orders, such as something as simple as "take that hill and hold it," will elicit either a wide-eyed vacuous dribbling stare, or could evoke a confusion that might trigger a rageful state as Ogryn gets frustrated at such a convoluted proposition. An order to line up in front of an oncoming enemy is usually the most that one should ever give to a unit of Ogryns without one of their own leaders present. This will form an immovable bastion of flesh and muscle that will neither retreat nor run from any enemy whatsoever. Alas, when the enemy starts to flank the line, then the simple instinct to turn to the side or to form a circle or square will be utterly lost on the Ogryns. But they will hold that line no matter what happens. Ogryns are incredibly faithful to the Imperial cult and literally believe that the Emperor is watching over them at all times. The Ogryns believe that the orders given by a commissar or officer literally come from the Emperor himself. They believe that he tells the officers what to do, and so their orders are from their god. Thus is their ardour for the fray far more than most, and always they burn with the kind of zeal that any chaplain, commissar, or priest of the ecclesiarchy would be envious of in their own regiments. They do have their own sergeant equivalent, called Boneheads. Whilst in recruitment or training, if an Ogryn has displayed a keen intellect far in excess of the norm, like being able to understand entire sentences of Gothic, or even the smarts to turn and face a new enemy when outnumbered, or perhaps, just perhaps, an ability to count beyond 2, then they are swiftly rushed off to be trained and enhanced. Such raw mental power cannot go to waste after all. Those chosen are then given robust but very intricate cybernetic augmentations and chemical enhancements called BONE, B-O-N-E, which stands for Biochemical Ogryn Neural Enhancements, hence being dubbed Boneheads. With this dazzling increase in cognitive processing, Ogryn Boneheads are able to understand even 2-part instructions, and used to maintain order in the ranks as, after all is said and done, Ogryns in a battle or rage can only be managed by other Ogryns. Anyone else trying to intervene, as stated, is likely to become a pate in short order. Often used as bodyguards, their primitive minds can understand, over time, that they need to defend their charge. Anyone with an Ogryn bodyguard is either exceptionally high in rank, amazingly talented, or very well connected indeed. For the Ogryn will stand in front of gunfire, will throw itself onto grenades, or break anything or anyone that comes within spitting distance of their charge. Alas, their lack of cognitive skills means that they are very difficult regiments to use effectively. But when they are placed in the hands of a capable commander, the results can be staggering. There are actually a few roles that Ogryns may be utilized in with exceptional results, but I may go into more detail on them in the future. The most basic are that of heavy close-range support, and that of holding the line, or shock assault units par excellence, which is most often done by Bullgryns. To quote, Bullgryns. The most obstinate Ogryns, known as Bullgryns, are clad in custom-made armor and carry crude assault weaponry that capitalizes on the Abhuman's stature and resilience. Some wield power mauls and buckler-like brute shields, while others march to battle carrying simple but effective slab shields, locking together to form a mobile defense line. So deployed, these units provide their comrades with a wall of walking cover as they advance. Bullgryns take their duties very seriously, and will often form a line at the slightest sound of gunfire. which can be most inconvenient in crowded trenches. Yet guardsmen advancing behind a Bullgryns squad swiftly forget such mishaps as shots whine harmlessly from the Ogryns' shields, leaving these soldiers crouched in their lee unharmed. Needless to say, casualties are high among the Abhuman themselves, but the close-range bombardments of their grenadier gauntlets exact brutal revenge soon enough. The foe are left reeling and shell-shocked even before the maul-wielding Ogryns charge into their midst and bludgeon the survivors to a red paste. The Ogryns of the Anarch Zeta 81st Immovables Regiment have gained a reputation for holding their position no matter how much punishment they take. This strength is also their greatest weakness, as in lieu of new orders they will remain rooted to the spot, even if an outflanking force has rounded their shield wall. The Immovables are therefore often teamed with squads of rattling snipers. The diminutive sharpshooters lie in wait behind their giant Abhuman cousins out of sight of the foe. As the enemy approaches the immovable wall, the rattlings open fire from their protected positions before quickly redeploying as the tides of battle shift. End quote. So, one can see the invaluable contribution that Ogryn regiments and units can make to our overall war effort of humanity. When all is said and done, a line of immovable slab shield-toting Ogryns is a wall that simply cannot be passed without ordnance or special weaponry being brought to bear on them. Said ordnance and equipment that is not targeting more rare and valuable material elsewhere on the battlefield. But their true use is on the charge. When all else falters, when the enemy is rampaging over the lines and nothing and nobody can halt their advance, the able commander has a reserve of berserk giants ready, with hundreds of towering colossi of rage and brute strength bearing down on them at exceptional speed, shouting so loudly that it may even challenge the screams of the howling banshees. There are few forces in the galaxy that would not be forced to give pause if they did not simply break or be overrun in their turn. Unlike the beastmen of yore, that were often seen amongst the forces of the Imperium, but are now hardly ever used, the Ogryns are a feature of the Imperial Guard that seems to be likely to last. One can only imagine that this is much to the displeasure of the opponents of mankind. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. If you have enjoyed my introduction to the Ogryns, please consider liking and subscribing. If you do so, then please do remember to press the notifications button. I would not wish you to miss out. Also, if you are a regular gentle listener, then do please consider supporting us on Patreon. This content takes a lot longer to generate than you might think. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun.